Good morning and welcome. We're delighted you've joined us today as we continue our series, The Wisdom of the Trees. Today we're exploring their teachings about living among ancestors. We honor National Indigenous Peoples Day, acknowledging our indebtedness to our land's First Peoples, honoring the culture and traditions, languages, spiritualities of our Indigenous brothers and sisters whose story is woven into this land. We're surrounded in this space at Southminster Steinhauer United Church with 7 wise words that represent the 7 sacred teachings, the grandfathers' teachings, the elders' teachings, 7 natural laws that have been foundational for many Indigenous peoples, passed down from the elders to the children from generation to generation. The teachings of humility, respect, love, truth, honesty, wisdom, courage. As we honor this legacy and heritage and National Indigenous Peoples Day, we welcome Elder Elsie Paul, who spoke with us earlier this week and graciously shares in our celebration today. With me here this morning is my teammate Chris, who, along with his daughter Daisy, offer special music into the gift of this day with us. We're also joined by Deb, who has so generously given over her time in these weeks and is with us again to help us sing the songs we need to sing in this time. And Brett and Noah are here with us providing technical support, and without their help, none of this would be possible for us to gather with each other in this way. We welcome each of you who have taken time to be with us today in the midst of all that Father's Day is in our lives, celebrating brothers, husbands, fathers, grandfathers, parents, remembering those ancestors who have gone before us. However you come to this day, whoever you are, whatever griefs or joys you carry, whatever the state of your spirit, we welcome you to this time where we are with one another, creating spiritual community, singing and praying and seeking together what it is we need to live in the intensity of this time. Take a moment now to remember the storied land that you call home, to acknowledge its First Peoples, ancestral lands, deep with memory and tradition. For SSUC here in Edmonton and in Saskatoon, we make our home on the ancestral lands of Treaty 6 with Cree and Métis people who have called this land home for generations. A gathering place and traveling route for many other Indigenous peoples, Blackfoot, Dene, Nakota Sioux peoples, and adopted home to so many of us who have come either very recently or generations ago. Whatever our history, whatever our heritage, we gather with each other this day in search of reconciling ways. And so I invite us to sing our commitment together in words and melody that Christopher New has given for us to sing with Deb's leadership and help. I invite you to sing right where you are.
Honoring, remembering where we meet.
I invite you to take a candle where you are and light it with us as we join our lights to one another. As we light our candle, we remember that we are born of fire. We come to ignite one another with a passion for life. We come to remember that we're born of water, of bodies, mostly water, on a watery planet we call home. We come to remember we are air, a single breath that separates us from not being, that gives us life again for another moment. We come to remember that we are soil, building ground for one another. We are descendants of fire, water, air, and soil. In the presence of these elements, our ancestors, we bring ourselves to this day, seeking to strengthen our intention to live more nearly as we pray. So we sing again with one another, with the help of Rochelle Ikram, in a song we've come to know well in this time in which we are exploring the wisdom of the trees.
As trees reach up to the sunlight, as leaves unfurl in the spring, as roots dig deep into history, our lives seek wisdom to sing. This is a glimpse of the journey. This is the hope of our soul. To live more closely as we pray, connected in one life long.
Hello, everyone. As our time for all ages today, I want to share a story with you that's a favorite from 2019 because it speaks about how each of us have a unique light to shine and that each of us have something to teach and something to learn from each other. As we honor this National Indigenous Peoples Day, as we celebrate Pride Month, as we recognize that Black Lives Matter, in all of these ways, we seek to learn, we seek to teach, and we seek to honor everyone's unique light. So, I want us to enjoy Ferencz's Light by Jessica Colasso, illustrated by Angela Lee. Ferenc likes dancing. Ferenc likes books. But there is one thing Ferenc does not like. Ferenc does not like her light. It's always shining at the wrong time. At the movies, at slumber parties, during games of hide and seek. Your light makes you unique, said her mother. No one shines just like you. I'll cover up my light, Ferenc thought. She gathered leaves and wrapped them around her until her light was hidden. The next day, Ferenc's friends needed her help. At the movies, Tick dropped his snack under his seat. "Ferenz, can you shine your light down here?" "What light?" "I don't have a light," snapped Ferenz. At the slumber party, Natalie whispered, "Ferenz, make your light shine. I'm scared of the dark." But Ferenz let out a loud snore and pretended to be asleep. During a game of hide and seek, Ferenz hid in her best spot, deep in the dark bushes. "Come out, Ferenz!" shouted Legs. "It's too hard to find you when your light doesn't shine." But Ferenz pretended not to hear and flew away as fast as she could. Ferenz found herself deep in the forest, far away from her friends. She'd hoped they would forget about her light. She felt very sad. Just as she began to cry, she heard a strange sound coming from the bushes behind her. Munch, 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 crunch, munch. Ferenz flew closer to investigate. "What are you doing?" asked Ferenz. "Creating my masterpiece!" exclaimed a beetle, clicking his huge pincers. "I'm Kiri. I'm using my magnificent pincers to make wonderful art. Isn't it amazing?" "It's lovely," said Ferenz. As she looked at Kiri's art, Ferenz's light began to shine through the patterns in the leaves. "Oh, how beautiful," Ferenz gasped, enchanted by the colors and shapes that appeared all around her. "Wow," whispered Kiri, "your light is making my art even more magical. What a wonderful gift you have." "Oh no," said Ferenz. "I don't like my light. I wish it would go away." She began grabbing her leaves again to wrap around herself. "I understand," said Kiri. "I used to feel the same way about my pincers, but then I realized I am brilliant. I am wonderful. I am unique. I wish I could feel like that about my light, Kiri, but I don't." Ferenz exclaimed, and she flew home. A few days later, Ferenz received a package. There was a note. It said, "Dear Ferenz, I made this skirt just for you. I hope you'll wear it to my art show tomorrow. Your light is a gift. Let it shine. Love, Kiri." Ferenz felt nervous as she arrived at the art show the next day, but as her light glimmered through her skirt, she saw the faces of her friends. "How lovely. Brilliant. See what happens when you let your light shine?" While Ferenz twirled on the stage, she realized how powerful her light was. It was creating magical art, joy for her friends, and happiness in her heart. Suddenly, Ferenz felt very grateful that she was a firefly. She grew to love her light, even when it was difficult. She always remembered the night she let her light shine for everyone to see. As we share another piece of wisdom by Joy Harjo, I'll share a little bit about Joy. Joy was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and is a member of the Muskogee Nation. She was named U.S. Poet Laureate in June of 2019. And she once commented, "I feel strongly that I have a responsibility to all the sources that I am, to all the past and future ancestors, to my home country, to all places that I touch down on and that are myself, to all voices, all women, all of my tribe, all people, all earth, and beyond that to all beginnings and endings." We now read a poem of Joy Harjo entitled Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life, and her mother's, and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, all who have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember. In this writing of a contemporary poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
So I'm welcoming Elsie Paul with us this morning. Elsie's no stranger to our community. She's very much a part of us here at Southminster Steinhauer United Church, a great friend of this community, and we are delighted that you're part of our celebrating of National Indigenous Peoples Day today.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if you might talk with us a little bit about the role of the ancestors in your tradition, in the teachings that have been passed down to you in your tradition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I truly believe our ancestors are even in this room here with us. You know, I feel comfortable just knowing that. That's what I've learned from my elders. Our ancestors are always been with us from generation to generation to continue the support and the teachings, you know. And so I feel good about that. It makes me feel comfortable because when I leave this world, I'll still be here for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. You know, that makes me feel good, just knowing that. You know, I'll always be around them. And it feels good that my ancestors are around to continue that sense of feeling you get. You know, it feels good. I like that.
As a Cree Métis woman, could you talk a little bit about the role of the elder in your culture?
Mm-hmm. Okay, from what I've learned, you know, like, I mean, it's such a positive thing to be. We don't self-proclaim ourselves to be elders. The community gives you that role. You know, they tell you, they call you the elder. It's what you do in a community, you know. They acknowledge that and recognize you, you know, and that's such a good thing.
And you and I were talking earlier about how, you know, often in our society, in European Western society, there's this real quest for staying young or being young or being youthful or looking young. And I hear you saying something different about, you know, the value of being older, being wiser, having something to offer as an elder to those who are coming after you.
Well, there's nothing positive and nothing negative about you're getting good or you're getting better. You know, that's what the elder said. The older you become, you develop more wisdom and knowledge. You know, it's not a negative thing to get old, it's getting better, you know. And I feel good about that. I even learned about the gray hair. The elder told us that when you have gray hair, it's a sign of wisdom, you know. And to me, that holy, that's, you know, when I learned about that, because when I first saw gray hair on, I felt bad way back then, you know, because I thought it was such a negative thing. I did not want to get old. But now I feel good about getting old, you know, because now it's more of a positive thing for me, because it makes me feel good. The older I become, if I go on this journey, this cultural journey, I'll get more wisdom and knowledge and more experience for the community, my family, my great-grandchildren. That's what I'm doing now. I'm teaching my great-grandchildren, you know, and teaching them. The older you become, you're getting better, you know.
And I've heard you speak about the kukums. That's a Cree word for grandmother?
Yeah, kukums are grandmothers, you know, and that's how come our society is called Kukum Ksewatsun Society, you know. That word Ksewatsun is such a positive word, you know, from what I've learned. It's unconditional love of grandmothers, you know. And even grandfathers, they've practiced all of that together a long time ago from what I've learned. The teachings, the love, the kindness, the generosity, you know, and everything, respect. The more empathy we have, the more we learn about our culture. Our elders, they all possess those things, you know. They're really valuable, the elders, and that's how come you teach the younger generation to respect the elders, because they're our teachers and our healers and our cultural preservers, you know. So,
could you tell us a little bit about the Kukums work that you're part of? There's a community of Kukums that gather, that do various activities together and offer teachings to the children?
Well, you know, we have cultural camps every year, and now we're inviting the youth to come to with the grandmothers to the camp, because it's a cultural thing. It's nothing new, you know. They used to do that a long time ago. They were encouraged to spend time with the elders, but be very respectful. Make sure you listen, you know, because if you don't listen, you miss out the lessons, you know. And now we're wanting to have multicultural Kukum teaching calendar, so they can come and bring their culture, because it's part of the culture relationship building. We need to develop a good relationship with the newcomers, the settlers and all that, because when we spend time together, even with our own people, hey, you got gifts and talents just like us. And then when we do that, we begin to honor and respect each other. And when we do that, there's an opportunity for us to develop a good working relationship, you know. And then we can preserve the culture and honor each other's culture and everything. Our children see us doing that. They learn that from us. See, we're passing it on to the next generation. So instead of fighting and disrespecting each other.
It's kind of a kind of modeling of showing
yes.
how it could be, so that the children might learn that as well.
Oh, and it's so important, you know, because then they'll have a better working relationship than what we learned as, you know, we didn't. We were just really confused, you know. But the culture brings that teaching to us.
A healing journey.
Yeah, to love one another, to honor each other, to respect one another. We need to do that with everyone, because nobody's going to go away. We're not going to go away. The newcomers are not going to go away. The settlers are not going to go away. So we better develop a positive, working, loving relationship with each other so we can work together, you know. And that's what we're trying to, reclaiming our roles. Because there was, you know, even when I was growing up, even though I didn't know anything about my culture, when the elders would set the table, the visitors set the table, you know, they were welcoming the people. That's their cultural way from a long time ago, even though they didn't explain it to us, but we learned it, you know. And now, because I've learned that from the elders now, the welcoming of the people. Even this little thing that's crawling here, see? We were told long time ago not to kill the little insects, because they belong on this world somehow. They have a purpose for being here.
We're all part of this
everything,
web.
Yes, you know, they were meant to be here. We're meant to be here from the spirit world. The insects and the animals, and they're all on Mother Earth. They're here for a purpose, you know. One time I was doing smudging at this government place, and there was a little bug walk. I went by and I smudged it, because they have a purpose for being here. Everybody, every animal, the plants and animals, the human beings, they all have a purpose here, you know, and we need to honor and respect them, you know, so.
So this ant has joined our conversation.
Mm-hmm. You see, he came and blessed us. We can think of it like that. I taught that to my grandchildren when the spider was in the bathroom, you know, and oh, I said, it smells why they need to drink. They're probably thirsty. So I went and wet my hands, and we went like this. And then that little 5-year-old later on, she's, Grandma, there's a spider in the bathroom. It's thirsty. Instead of killing it, you know. We were told when I was young, don't kill the spiders, it'll rain. But they didn't explain anything to us, you know. And now, you know, see, they have a purpose here on Mother Earth.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being part of our celebration and honoring of National Indigenous Peoples Day today, and for being part of our community and teaching us and offering us the gifts of your culture. Thank you.
You know, it's an honor. I thank you so much for giving me this little opportunity to be here. You know, I never thought I didn't know it was going to be. You know, I feel good in my world now. And culture makes you who you are. That's how come I feel good in my own skin now. I'm not shame-based anymore. Because the more I learn about my culture, the more I feel good in my own skin. And I acknowledge both my Métis culture and my Cree culture.
And there's so much to be proud of.
Oh, yes, you know, and then the proudest thing I have is that I'm able to teach my great-grandchildren now those teachings, you know. I am proud of who I am now, you know, because it makes me feel good in my mind, body, and spirit. The more I learn about my culture, the more good I feel. Culture makes you who you are. And then you begin to love other people that are here.
It moves out.
Yes, it does, you know. Ksewatsun, that's a Cree word, that's unconditional love of grandmothers. When you show that and you feel that, you get to love everybody, even if they're not from this Treaty 6 land, you know. We get to love them. That's how come we're working on our multicultural Kukum teaching calendar, you know. We want to learn about, that's exciting, to learn about different cultural ways, you know, because we want to respect their ways and honor them. Hi, I'm
Hi.
glad. Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
I want to share a poem with you by Mary Woodbury. Mary is no stranger to the community of Southminster Steinhauer United Church, no stranger to Edmonton. Mary's early life took her from Ontario to Newfoundland. She lived in New York and Italy before Edmonton became her home in the late 1970s. She's the author of a number of best-selling books for young people, a number of books for adults, a number of poetry books, and a memoir, Still Life at 70. She founded the Books Collective, a publishing house that gave many young authors their start. And until her death, she served on the board of YABS, a Young Alberta Book Society. Mary was a part of Southminster Steinhauer United Church in the 1980s when her husband Claire was on the ministry team here. Mary's voice fell silent with her death 7 years ago. This poem of hers I met many years ago, and it has stayed with me and impacted me in many ways in my journey. Alluding to a story, a well-known story in the Gospels, a story of Jesus of Nazareth. It takes its title and echoes that story, Transfiguration. The other day, when I was making biscuits, folding the dough, pressing the heel of my hand in the flesh, letting my skin enter that living mass of flour and milk, baking powder and lard, enjoying the sensual pleasure of work. The other day, when I was patting and rolling the dough to an even 1/2 inch, enjoying the mundane task of preparing good things to eat, I felt a shiver of recognition, a stirring of the blood, a blurring of the eyes. And I was my great-great-grandmother, Mary Shaw McAllister from Islay, Scotland, kneading dough on a rough-hewn pine table in a log cabin boasting a view of the Blue Mountains beside a freshly painted orchard on the 10th line in Simcoe County, just outside Collingwood, Upper Canada, 150 years ago. For that transparent moment, I was split, like an atom of pure energy, into more than one woman, in more than one kitchen, alive in more than one history. I was left feeling elated and empty, and put the biscuits in the hot oven. I had no disciples asking if they should build a cairn to mark the spot where this transfiguration took place. I am a simple woman. I mark events on pieces of paper and trust that those who stumble on my words will recall their own transfigurations. We touch the universal and are changed. We touch the particular, bread, bowl, or basket, and we are transformed. In the words of this poet, known to many of us, may we find wisdom for our living. I'm intrigued by the renewed interest in our roots, discovering where we come from and who we are. I was surprised when my father began to research the generations of his family and my mother's family after he retired. He searched out scattered relatives that we'd never met, seeking to learn what he could about the generations that had come before him. He built our branch of genealogy that went back for several generations. In conversations with many of you, I hear us talking about subscribing to databases like Ancestry.com, or sending off our saliva for a spit test to discover something about our identity, something about our roots. Even in a cursory reading of the Bible, it isn't long before you run into streams of begats, So-and-so begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, and so on it goes. The pedigree of the characters who inhabit these narratives, that pedigree is worthy of a whole lot of scribing to tell us who they are, by telling us who they came from, who their father was and who his father was, and so on. In one of the two gospel narratives that tell us anything about the beginnings of Jesus of Nazareth, the book of Matthew opens giving us 18 verses to introduce us to the story of Jesus by his lineage, placing him in a family tree with sequences that will take him back generations to characters like Abraham and King David. It wasn't about proving biology. It was a way of establishing his place in the continuity of his courageous ancestors, placing him in his spiritual lineage. For many ancient people, one's genealogy isn't incidental. It's essential to tell us who someone is by identifying their ancestors. When we spent time in the Redwoods earlier this year, I was struck by the fact that when you walk among those trees, those ancient trees, you are walking through a graveyard and walking through a nursery at the same time. The trees that are thriving are growing in and among the presence of the fallen. Some of that fallen become nurse logs, teeming with life and providing the humus that seeds but will sprout into new life, new trees growing out of the bodies of their ancestors. And when we light a candle each week, we are acknowledging that we are descendants of light waves and offspring of the original fireball. When our Indigenous brothers and sisters look up at the stars, many of them say that they are watching the campfires of their ancestors. In 3 of the accounts that have been passed down to us in the stories we've inherited of Jesus, we're given a story about him in the company of his ancestors. This story is always set in the context of his need to gain perspective and strength in the midst of a cruel time he was facing. As the hostilities of his opponents were closing in on him, he did what the giants of his history had done before him. He chose to be in the company of his most trusted friends. He took his followers, Peter, James, and John, to a mountain, to a spiritscape, a place that was familiar to his ancestors. Like Moses, he retreated to the solitude of a mountain to find what he needed to face the chaos of what was coming. Like Elijah, when Elijah was faced with threats to his life, like Elijah, Jesus too sought a wild place, a wilderness, where in solitude he could face his fear and his grief and his burnout and his anxiety. And the fear that he was feeling in that moment. The story takes Jesus and his supportive community of 3 friends to a mountain for a brief respite from the intensity of all that was closing in on them. It became a thin place, a transparent moment in Mary Woodbury's words. A luminous moment, a time out of time moment, a place of seeing through time into deep time. And in that moment, the story tells us they experienced themselves to be in the presence of their ancestors, Moses and Elijah. Those key representatives of their spiritual tradition, Moses as the giver of the moral, ethical law, and Elijah as the one who stands in for the prophets, those who have been the voices of protest and conscience, calling their leadership back to account in generation after generation, pestering kings and calling their people into right relationships. These ancestors in the story are not accidental. They represent the ethical and prophetic lineage in which Jesus of Nazareth stood. Their appearance in the story served to ground him and guide him in this crucial time in which he found himself. He comes to his moment in continuity with those who have gone before him. And as Mary Woodbury reminds us in her poem, like those who wanted to build a cairn, a monument, we are those who place markers, gravestones, and yet we forget that we live among our ancestors. We stand in their story, guided by their wisdom and taught by their mistakes. In this pandemic time, we hear the word unprecedented. We hear it again and again. And truly, there are many unique aspects to the time we're facing on many fronts. The pursuit for right relationship with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. The struggle to address white privilege and dominance and work toward racial and economic justice. The challenge to stay connected to one another and to our deepest humanity in the midst of a pandemic. But are we truly without precedent? I sometimes wonder if some of our isolation and our lostness in this moment comes from seeing ourselves to be alone and facing what has never been faced before. We might be a little arrogant to think that life has not passed this way before. We might be a little short-sighted in thinking that our generation is the only generation to have been confronted with such threats and challenges. We live on a planet that has faced so many crises in its billions of years of experience. And our species has faced so many challenges in our hundreds of thousands of years of history. Perhaps we stand just like the trees, among generations of helpers in our ancestry, both human and more than human. And that ancestry has much to teach us if we will become its students, if we will learn from our elders, if we will remember our ancestors. In the words Joy Harjo has given us, remember the earth, whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. We didn't seed ourselves into this life. We didn't build the branch we sit on. We are rooted in the wisdom of a universe, a planet, amazingly adaptive and creative. We stand in a line of ancestors who have passed this way before. We have many ancestors, many precedents, many guides, many teachers. May we be open to their wisdom as we stand in the witness of the trees who live among their ancestors. We are not alone, not abandoned. We stand in the company of those who have passed this way before.
This is a time we honor and name those who gathered before us. This is a time we hear the word in the voices never heard, who shatter all myths of pretension. Out of the truth of those turned away, oppressed and discarded. Who shall reap and who shall sow? Who decides what seeds will grow? And who lays a claim to the harvest? Far off Russian, light of vision, into the ashes we sow. Seeds of change, rooting of wisdom, dark and fertile, yielding a harvest of hope, good for all people who live in the land. Cycles move, people can change, turning fresh in the morning. Blossoms of joy amidst the pain. Love that died is born again, and sacred land of people. Out of the ash a cauldron of green, fresh, eager, and faithful. Hope long scorned by powers that be, lives now as people free, their dreams for tomorrow reviving. Far off Russian, light of vision, into the ashes we sow. Seeds of change, rooting of wisdom,
We go in the company of all that has gone before us. Long, deep wisdom of the universe. Long, deep wisdom of the creatures who have been here long before the humans. Long, deep wisdom of our ancestors, human and more than human. We join ourselves to one another as we extinguish the particular flame of this time, and let it be changed into how it is that we will be in the world, shaped, changed by this time that we have shared with one another. And so we go in the grace and goodness of life, knowing we are not alone. We come from a long and deep love, and we go to give expression to that in our time, in our place. We go together in the company of all who've gone before us. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you next time. Stay with us for the music that closes our time together, and a few slides of announcement and invitation to you that will come just now.